Okay, everybody, welcome to this situational briefing about the events that are taking place between the State of Israel and the Gaza Strip at this time. Now, the State of Israel is once again in the midst of a significant operation. The operation has been dubbed or called Operation Shield and Arrow. This is a continuation of operations which include Operation Cast Lead, Operation Pillar of Defense, Operation Protective Edge, Operation Guardian of the Walls, and now Operation Shield and Arrow. And I think I skipped one as well. On Tuesday, all of these operations have taken place since the disengagement from the Gaza Strip back in 2005, something that I personally believe is the original sin in terms of Israeli policymaking and security strategy. But that's something we can get into during the course of this conversation if time permits. But let's come to the present moment. On Tuesday morning, the Israel Defense Forces killed 3 senior members of Palestinian Islamic Jihad inside the Gaza Strip. Those individuals were Khalil Batini, who commanded Islamic Jihad in northern Gaza. He was entrusted with approving and carrying out all terrorist activities from northern Gaza, as well as planning and directing terrorist attacks on Israeli civilians and planning rocket attacks against Israel in the immediate future, according to a statement by the Israel Defense Forces. The second individual was Jihad Hanem, and please correct me if I'm mispronouncing any of these names. He was a senior official in the group's military council and was one of the most senior members of that organization, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And he previously served in several key positions, including as head of Islamic Jihad's Southern Gaza Brigade and secretary of the Military Council. And the third was Tariq Izz-Eddin. He was director of Islamic Jihad terrorist activities in the West Bank from a base inside the Gaza Strip. He was 49 years of age, and he was involved in moving money and funding between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, specifically for terrorist activities, according to a statement again released by the Israel Defense Forces. And he'd been previously jailed in Israel for involvement in suicide bombings during the course of the early 2000s. Now, the separate strikes on these 3 individuals took place within a time frame totaling the actual striking 20 seconds. So all 3 were dispatched in the time frame of 20 seconds. For a little bit more context, the targeted killing of these 3 individuals came after Islamic Jihad fired 104 rockets toward Israel in response to the death of an alleged senior member of the group who had been on hunger strike in an Israeli prison. And during that clash on May the 2nd, there were direct hits on the Israeli town of Sderot, which has borne the brunt of rockets from the Gaza Strip since Israel's disengagement in 2005. And those during the course of those clashes and during those rocket attacks, damage was caused to homes and to cars, and injury to 3 workers inside Sderot. So that's a little bit of context. Please be clear, everybody, the 3 individuals who were dispatched, these were people engaged in evil, in terror, in orchestrating terror, and seeking to harm Israeli citizens and Israeli civilians. So my first question goes to Yochai. Incidentally, one last caveat. There is the real prospect that either one or both of our guests today will have to run to the bomb shelter or walk to the bomb shelter during the course of this webinar. If that is the case, we'll continue in their absence until they return. But I just wanted to let everyone know that this is the midst of an ongoing conflagration between Palestinian Islamic Jihad and the State of Israel. So, Yochai, I just want to begin with you. Both Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas have said that they will retaliate against the State of Israel for these targeted killings. Now, these are 2 distinct organizations with some broad elements of overlap, but I'd like you please to explain to the audience what differentiates Hamas from Palestinian Islamic Jihad and what unites them. Let's just start with that basic information, please.
Well, Hamas is actually the ruler of the Gaza Strip. He is the one in control, and everything that happens in the Gaza Strip actually goes through or by Hamas leadership and Hamas operatives. So they're in control. The Islamic Jihad is a smaller organization. It is not in control of anything, and it usually looks at Hamas as its big brother or the senior officials there for instructions, for guidance on regarding of what is going on through Israel. Although when you look at those two organizations, they one, the Islamic Jihad takes its orders from Iran directly. It is getting its finances from Iran, it's getting everything from Iran, while Hamas is far more independent. They also depend on Iran for certain things, but they're not taking orders from Iran, though they are on several years have been tightening their ties with the Iranians, with Hezbollah, and trying to coordinate operations in the north and in the south. If something happens in the south, or if there is a war in Lebanon, the difference. So what connects them is what they call resistance, the Muqawama. Both are terrorist organizations that have sought to attack Israelis. They're using terror tactics. They use the same weapons. They're using rockets. Some of them are manufactured through Iranians and by Iranian knowledge, and thus they are united in the cause of resistance, in the cause of terrorism, and getting Israel out of our homeland, out of our ancestral homeland. However, Hamas is in control, so they have responsibilities. They're the one that look at the population, at paying the teachers, at paying salaries for their organizations. And the Islamic Jihad is a far smaller organization, mainly of operational operatives, and so they're not looking at the bigger picture. When they want to act, when they want to aggravate the situation on Iranian agendas, they do so. Hamas has a broader view of these things, including what they want to achieve if and when Abu Mazen passes away. So they're looking at the West Bank as their prize, and they're building themselves into getting into the West Bank in the future. So they're looking at things far more broadly and are willing to work for calm in the Gaza Strip, while the Islamic Jihad are mainly instigators of terrorism and unrest.
So again, to you, Yochai, and then David, I'll come to you in a moment. There's some 270 approximately rockets by my last check that have been fired.
400. Now it's 400.
Again, now it's increased 400. To 400. So it shows you how rapidly this is unfolding, really. So 400, is it 400 or is it above 400?
Yeah, that's the latest count, I think, around 400.
So about 400 rockets have been fired toward Israel from the Gaza Strip. Dozens of those rockets have fallen within the Strip. It doesn't appear thus far that Hamas has really joined the fray beyond some statements with Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Can you tell us why they're not more engaged in this rocketing towards the Jewish state?
Well, this is a repeat of what happened the last time when you have Guardians of the Wall and Hamas chose to sit out. When they saw that they can sit out these kinds of things, and they didn't get a backlash out of it. So if you can get a proxy to do your work, your dirty work, and support them, gain the moral high ground of the Palestinians of supporting the resistance while not incurring any damage to your infrastructure, and have the instigators, the one that are not under control, take a beating from time to time, this is something that Hamas is willing to live with. And to some extent, we're even looking at it favorably when the late Abu al-Ata was taken out. They saw it as a positive thing because Islamic Jihad was trying to usurp their control, trying to challenge their authority. So when Israel takes out the Islamic Jihad, there is an element in Hamas that says, okay, if we can sit this one out, let Israel take all the Israeli society, the Israeli economy, take the brunt of it, and we're not getting hurt by it, but we're supporting morally, and nothing really bad happens to the Gaza Strip because we're not looking at hundreds of deaths. We're not looking at hundreds of thousands of deaths. So Hamas may view this, and it has viewed it last time and is viewing it right now as something that they can live with. So
I'm just going to, David, I'm coming right to you. Don't worry.
I wanted to say something about your first.
Yes, I'll come right to you. But I will just say, Yochai, again, this is something that frustrates me massively, because it seems to be that the state of Israel is allowing a terrorist organization to operate out of an enclave that is under the control of another terrorist organization, Hamas. The smaller terror organization being Palestinian Islamic Jihad. They get to fire 400 rockets toward the States of Israel. The States of Israel does not hold Hamas responsible for this, isn't striking at Hamas. It just seems a complete juxtaposition with our policy with regard to Hezbollah in Lebanon. How often do we hear the idea that if Hezbollah, the proxy, without obligations to the international community, if the proxy fires on Israel from southern Lebanon, then we will hold Lebanon responsible in our retaliation. But here, when it comes to the Gaza Strip, we do no such thing. We just allow Palestinian Islamic Jihad to fire. Hamas kind of raises its hands and says, there's nothing we can do here, nothing to see here, we're not part of this. And they go unpunished. That to me seems less than sensible.
I'll take it after David takes his.
Go for it, David, please. And Yochai, you've got time.
First of all, allow me first of all to add something to what Yochai has just said. And he was correctly speaking about both Hamas and Al Jihad al-Islami. But I would like to say something very much important in this regard, in order that our audience, that the people which are looking at us now, will understand properly, the differences between Hamas and Al Jihad al-Islami. First of all, I would like to tell you in this regard that beside the fact that both these Islamic organizations have a common goal of destroying the state of Israel, there are many, many other, I would say, things that are characterizing each and unique one of these organizations separately. First of all, I would like to say in this regard that the Islamic Jihad movement, which was established in the year 1981 by a guy named Dr. Fathi Shqaqi, who I know personally, is not but a local Islamic organization operating in the Palestinian territories in order, first of all, to destroy Israel and to establish later on a Palestinian Islamic state on the ruins of the state of Israel. This is Al Jihad al-Islami al-Falastini. But Hamas, pay attention, very much important what I'm going to tell you. You know, all the Palestinian organizations have in the name the word Palestine or Palestinian, but Hamas is with no Palestine. Hamas is the abbreviations of Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya, the Islamic resistance movement, no Palestine, because as a matter of fact, originally, Hamas is a branch of, I would say, an organization called Al-Ikhwan al-Muslimin, the Islamic Brotherhood movement, which was founded at the 20s of the 20th century in Egypt and spread all over the Middle East. And as a matter of fact, in practical terms, Hamas is not but a branch of Al-Ikhwan al-Muslimin in the heart of the Palestinian entity. And this is something very much important to say, because Hamas is not going to be self-sufficed in having control over Palestine, let's say, or in destroying the state of Israel. And as a matter of fact, Hamas has two phases in their ideology to be fulfilled in the future. The first phase is, of course, destroying the state of Israel and establishing a Palestinian Islamic state on the ruins of Israel within a known boundaries, known borders, min al-Bahr hatta al-Nahr, from the sea, the Mediterranean Sea, to the Jordan River. And after fulfilling and establishing the Palestinian Islamic State, there will be the second phase, which is reviving the Islamic Caliphate, as it was after the time of the Prophet Muhammad and the four, caliphs after in the empire of Bet Umayyah house, and Bet Abbas house. And this is the ultimate goal of Hamas. As I've said before, two concrete phases. The first one, establishing a Palestinian Islamic state on the ruins of the state of Israel. And the second stage, the second phase, is reviving the Islamic Caliphate. This is why Hamas has no Palestine, the word Palestine, in its name. These are the differences between Hamas from the one side and Al-Jihad al-Islami from the other side. And as a matter of fact, as I began saying, there is something which is like a common denominator for these both organizations. And this is, of course, the destroy of the state of Israel. This is common to Hamas and to Al-Jihad al-Islami al-Falastini.
Thank you, David. And I really appreciate all of that context and the addition to the information that Yochai provided as well. Tell me something. I gave a very brief overview of the three individuals who were killed by the Israeli security forces, but nobody is more expert in this area than you. Tell us a bit more about the three who were dispatched.
As a matter of fact, you spoke in your words before we started the interview. These are three, I would say, senior activists in terrorism in Al-Jihad al-Islami al-Falastini in Gaza. One of them, Izzeddin, is not originally from Gaza. He is from the West Bank, and he is responsible for what we call the unification of the fronts. That is to say, to have some kind of a coordination, a very active coordination in the terrorist act against Israel between Gaza and the West Bank and Judea and Samaria. And as a matter of fact, this is going hand by hand with what I heard from Al-Aruri, Saleh Al-Aruri, the leader of Hamas in Lebanon now, that spoke about coordination in all the fronts vis-a-vis the state of Israel. That is to say, Lebanon, Syria, the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, East Jerusalem, the Gaza Strip, and orchestrated and coordinated by the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is the main, I would say, factor in this regard when we are speaking about unification of the fronts vis-a-vis the state of Israel. So from my point of view, Izzeddin is the most prominent one. And as a matter of fact, I don't know if you saw a picture I sent you recently of Saleh Al-Aruri in a hospital outside the territories, I think in Turkey, in which he was treated for the cancer disease that he got. And I think that to a large extent, this is the key person. The other ones, as a matter of fact, are other active, I would say, personnel, active people in the Al-Jihad al-Islami Falastini, all of them, by the way, operating in the Gaza Strip. And I must say in this regard that Izzeddin is from the West Bank, he's not originally from Gaza. Mm-hmm. But I would like to say in this regard that the fact that these three activists, terrorists of Al-Jihad al-Islami, were annihilated in 20 minutes, as you have said at the beginning,
20 seconds.
This is something that we have to pay tribute, listen to the Shabak, what we call the security organization in Israel, for having the intelligence, the precise intelligence to translate this intelligence for, for actions in the field against these three individuals.
Thank you, David. So Yochai, your response to what I said about the inconsistent nature of Israel's holding to account the sovereigns of a given entity. Why is Palestinian Islamic Jihad allowed to fire 400 rockets towards the state of Israel, and Hamas goes unpunished for it, given that it is sovereign there in the Gaza Strip? That is inconsistent with our stated and repeated policy with regard to Lebanon and Hezbollah. Talk to me about that.
It's it's a decision that is taken by the government at a particular point in time. Let's say the previous government used to see Hamas as the one that is going to take the brunt of anything that happens from Gaza. So any rocket that was fired from Gaza was an excuse to take out a Hamas facility, a Hamas training ground, or Hamas manufacturing site. So we degraded Hamas by the fact that someone else was firing rockets at Israel. This was a way to degrade Hamas while making Hamas want to challenge those that challenge its authority. This is why Hamas did not engage while we took out the Islamic Jihad in the previous round, and this is something that might also influence Hamas calculations right now. So, if Israel wishes to take out or degrade the sovereign, then you use that. But if you don't want to get involved in a bigger fight, then you take out the little guy. So in Syria, for example, we're not taking it out on Assad. We're taking it out on the Iranians. We're taking it out on the militias. Everywhere.
Syria is different. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole. Syria is different because the sovereign there is clearly embattled and doesn't reign supreme and hasn't done for several years.
But we're taking it out on them as well.
Hamas.
When we attack places such as airports in Syria, we're taking it out on the Assad regime. So it depends on what kind of message you're trying to send and to whom. If you're trying to talk to Hamas and tell them, guys, you need to take care of your business and not let anyone shoot at Israel, then you take it out of Hamas's hide. And if you don't want, and if you want to say to Hamas, you better stay out of this work, because if we're going to take out the Islamic Jihad, and this is something that might be better for you as well, or good for you as well, then we take it out of the Islamic Jihad or someone else. It is a decision that Israel takes as someone views what they want to get. If someone wants to get into a bigger fight, they would have taken out Hamas. But right now, Israel doesn't want to go on a bigger fight. We're trying to look at how to deal with Iran, with the things that is happening that is strengthening Iran's hand, such as the detente with Saudi Arabia. Mm-hmm. So going into a protracted war in Gaza is something that is not in the current government's plans right now, as I see it. And so you take it out on Islamic Jihad, and it's a good thing, I think, because as we saw last year, the instigator of violence, when we talk about Jerusalem Day and the March of the Flags, it was the Islamic Jihad. It wasn't Hamas. Hamas sometimes joined after Islamic Jihad took. So if you're looking at it as a forward thinking, if you take out Islamic Jihad right now, then you're reducing the risk of a confrontation regarding Jerusalem Day, the March of the Flags, or the Nakba Day, which we're going to have in the next few days.
Okay, so I unsurprisingly, I completely disagree. I appreciate your perspective, but I do completely disagree with you. I'll explain why, and then we'll move on to another question. My view is that if we were to make it very, very clear to Hamas that they will be held accountable for any activities that are undertaken from their sovereign territory. I'm using the word sovereign for lack of a better word, quite frankly. I think everybody understands that, but from their sovereign territory, then one would not have this massive barrage of rocket fire from Palestinian Islamic Jihad in the first place. I don't think that would lead to an escalation. I think that could well lead to a de-escalation, and we'll just have to agree, as ever we do, to disagree on certain things. But I really do feel that there's a lack of consistency, and the danger of that inconsistency, Yochai, is that sovereign states elsewhere will not heed Israeli warnings that they will be held responsible for errant activities from within their territories by non-state actors. So I think it's quite a dangerous precedent, but we'll move on. And I want to talk a little bit with you again, Yochai, about the timing of this. And then, David, I want you to talk to me about the virtue of this. So, Yochai, the timing of this targeted killing. Why was the decision taken to carry out these killings in a combined fashion at this particular stage? Some people have said it's to preempt any conflagration that might follow the marches that are upcoming. Some people have said that it is because the intelligence coalesced in such a way that permitted for it to take place. Some have said that there was a need for the state of Israel to take decisive preemptive action. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, there are two ways to analyze the timeline. One is to look to the back and see what happened last week when Islamic Jihad and others fired over 100 rockets into Israel, and Israel seemed to look and not respond forcefully to what happened at that time over the death of Hadar Adnan. And so Israel might have bided its time to seek an opportunity, and when that opportunity arose, it took it. So it might be just that simple. The second thing, if you look at it as forward-looking and see that Israel has intelligence, probably, maybe, I don't know, that the Islamic Jihad is planning enough as it has in the past few years to attack Israel when we have Jerusalem Day, or when you have the March of the Flags, or when you have the Nakba Day, then Israel might think that it is good to preempt. Now, these two things might have coalesced. We had to retaliate to something that happened a week ago, and to look forward and to preempt a planned attack a week from now. And if you look at it in the political arena, there was also a large amount of pressure on the government to do something because it was starting to have cracks in the coalition. The fact that Israel did not retaliate forcefully last week.
So, David, you're a very strong proponent of targeted killings. You've written on several occasions for the MirYam Institute to the virtue of targeted killings. One of the things that people might say is every time that we carry out a targeted killing against a mainstay of one of these terrorist organizations, we end up absorbing rocket fire into the state of Israel, and therefore people might question the worthiness of targeted killings. But something that you've educated us about is that targeted killings are one of the most effective means of pushing our enemies onto the back foot. They're not undertaken because anybody believes that that will bring about an end to terrorist activities. They're not undertaken because anybody believes that there isn't a replacement just waiting to take the place of those who are dispatched by the Israeli security forces. They are taken to muddle up the strategy and the policy making and the tactics of our enemies, and they profoundly push our enemies back onto their heels. Can you just talk to us a little bit about that and why you see these targeted killings as virtuous?
Yes. As you said, correctly, I think that the targeted killings are one of the main, I would say, means taken by Israel against the terrorism in the Palestinian arena. And as you have said, correctly, during the last 30 years or more, there were dozens, more than 100 targeted killings perpetrated by the IDF with of course, the assistance of the Shabak. And I think this is the main, I would say, operation taken by Israel, that Hamas and Al-Jihad al-Islami in the Palestinian arena are very much afraid of. And this is why during the last couple of years, I've heard time and again, Hamas leaders, Al-Jihad al-Islami leaders, trying to press upon Israel not to take this mean against, the people, the activists of Hamas and Al-Jihad al-Islami. At the same time, I must tell you at the same breath that the influence of the targeted killings are not for a long period of time. You are making a targeted killings, and in accordance with our experience, after a couple of months, another guy, another person, another activist is coming to fulfill the same, I would say, position of the guy who was killed by Israel. But at the same time, as I've told you before, this is a very influential meme taken by Israel against the terrorist organization. And I think that Israel should continue in this regard as we are seeing the outcome and the results in the Palestinian side for these targeted killings. Allow me now, Benjamin, to say a few words about your former question, very, very quickly. I think that right now, as regard to Hamas strategy, I think that Hamas doesn't want to see a new escalation vis-a-vis the state of Israel. And this is why Hamas did not intervene until now in the confrontation, the military confrontation between Israel and Al-Jihad al-Islami in Gaza. By the way, a year ago, there was an Israeli, military operation in Gaza against Al-Jihad al-Islami, and Hamas stood aside with no intervention. And I tell you why. Hamas would like to enjoy, the Israeli, I would say, assistance given to the population in Gaza. I'm speaking in this regard about 17,000 workers commuting every day until this last operation to Israel to work inside Israel. I'm speaking about the Qadari financial aid given to the population, to needy families in the Gaza Strip. I'm speaking about fuel entering on a daily basis from Egypt to the Gaza Strip. I'm speaking about construction, I would say, projects which are being assisted by the Egyptian inside Gaza. So Hamas right now, this is not a ripe time for Hamas to have a new military escalation with the state of Israel. In any case, Hamas couldn't, not give the permit to Al-Jihad al-Islami to operate against Israel. At the same time, I agree with what I've heard before. Hamas is in total control over Gaza and a total control over Al-Jihad al-Islami inside Gaza.
So again, just to present a different perspective, and I appreciate all of the points that you've just raised, David, it might want to, Hamas, preserve the work permits that it extends to citizens of the Gaza Strip to come and work in the state of Israel. And it might want to enjoy the cash infusions coming from Qatar, among other places, for subsidies and for distribution among needy families. I'm sure plenty of that gets siphoned off to Hamas and used for corrupt means as well. But this is all nonsense. I mean, the state of Israel, specifically around the enclave of the Gaza Strip, would like its children to go to school, and they can't. It would like its workers to be able to work outside, and they can't. It would like its citizens in towns like Sderot and Netivot and even Beersheba and elsewhere to be able to stay in their homes, and they can't. In fact, the IDF is actually having to evacuate or facilitate the evacuation of our citizens. So I just find it completely unacceptable, and even, dare I say, perverse that Hamas is given the wiggle room to say what suits its citizens and at the same time what will befall Israeli citizens. I think that that's absolutely absurd. And I don't think that it's tenable. And I think that we again see ourselves, and Yochai knows that this is my view, but we again see ourselves in a conflict against precisely the same enemy, facing them down with precisely the same realities upon our citizenry, with the precise same lack of real consequence against them, with the precise same sense of foreboding that we will be back here at a time of our enemy's choosing. Now, you cannot tell me, even with all of your knowledge and all of your expertise, and I never walk away from a conversation with either of you being better educated by way of that conversation. I mean that sincerely. You cannot tell me that is sound policy. Don't tell me it's sound policy, because it isn't true. It isn't true for the citizens of the state of Israel who live under this rocket fire. And dare I say it, and here I'll come to you, Yochai, it's true that the missile defense systems that we have in Israel are effective and are intercepting the vast majority of rockets that fly toward us. But at the same time, terror is terror. And when a 4-year-old girl or a 5-year-old boy or a mother or a father hears a rocket siren ring out, and they know they've got 15 seconds, and who knows it better than you as a parent of young children who don't live there in the enclave, but you've certainly had to face this reality. I know that you felt it on your own flesh. You're terrorized. You might not be, thank God, harmed or maimed or injured, but terror is terror, and terror takes place by way of terrifying the citizenry. This cannot continue to be at the whim and at the will of Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Somehow the state of Israel has got to wrap its arms around this, surely.
I'm gonna say, because I understand the truly justified indignation that you're saying, the frustration and the feeling of helplessness. But I'm just telling you this. Look at what happened to Saudi Arabia. Okay. Look at what happened to the Saudis thought that they can crush the Houthis. That they don't want to get these guys, the tribe that can shoot at them at will, who they think they are, and they went into a military operation, bombarded the heck out of them, and what happened? Nothing. It didn't bring the Saudis anything except a protracted war, death, and the Houthis gained substantially out of that war, knowledge, aid from the Iranians, and now the Saudis and the Saudis paid with their relationship with the United States, the relationship with other countries, and with their own country being bombarded with rockets and missiles, accurate ones, on almost a daily basis. Now, why am I saying that? Because this is what Iran wants. It wants to drag Israel into a war, a protracted war, which will drain our resources, drain our energy, drain everything from Israel. Now, the question is whether Israel have the chance to deal with Gaza in a manner that does not involve a protracted war that would get that drainage on that strategic damage. That drain is a strategic damage. Mm-hmm. It is not something that you can say that is something you can put aside. Look at the Ukrainians, how much ammo they need to fight their war, how much ammo, just the ammunition that Israel will need. The last time that the IDF went on a major campaign in Gaza, and it was one that is rather not the longest one. The price tag was 10 billion shekels. This is the price. So the question is, are we going to fall into the trap that our enemies are setting up for us, or are we going to try something else? I don't know. I know that the government is in a bind. I think the mistake was done in 2009 when we had the capability and we were at the cusp of taking Gaza and taking Hamas out in Gaza. Gallant was then a general of the Southern Command, and he was there, and he was stopped by our leadership because they feared that the new president, Barack Obama, would not allow Israel the time and space to take out Hamas. Mm-hmm. And from then, it just got worse. So sometimes when you make a bad mistake at a particular point in time, you cannot recuperate. So I don't know if our government is doing the right thing. I don't know if it is doing something that is sound. I know that they fear, and there is a fear, that what is going on is a trap for Israel. This is something that the United States tried to take out in Afghanistan, in Iraq, the Houthis. This is not something that is easily done. And so with all the indignation, and I feel it in my heart and in my bones, and I have children that when they hear a siren, they fear. I see my son's heart racing. But I know that I don't think that the answer is an extended operation in Gaza unless we are willing to commit and unless there is a viable way out of it. And I think that's a bet that the current government is not willing to take at this time. Maybe if the circumstances change and situations are different, maybe we'll take out the Hamas in Gaza Strip. Right now, we're focusing on Iran.
So Yochai, thank you for that. I'll just add to your comments, and I really appreciate you providing not only your professional perspective, but also your personal perspective. And I'm sorry, truly sorry to hear about the terror and the suffering that your children and frankly anybody's children are surely suffering at this time. I think that the original mistake was not 2009. I think the original mistake was 2005 when we withdrew unilaterally without any obligations being placed upon anybody in the Gaza Strip. I think it was a horrendous error, a horrendous strategic error. And we are still paying the price for that terrible error. And I would predate 2009, which was a response to that error, and put the blame firmly on the disengagement or the withdrawal of 2005. I would merely say that between what we are doing and a long, protracted operation inside the Gaza Strip, there are many, many options. And I'm going to just say this is the last point, not because I want to have the final say on this. We'll continue to debate this. Unfortunately, it's going to carry on for years, but merely because I want to come to some other aspects of current events. I believe quite firmly that the state of Israel has the opportunity to hold Hamas to account for what takes place in its territory. And as an example, if Hamas is going to sit on its hands and allow 400 rockets to be fired onto the state of Israel, including those rockets that terrify your children, then the heads of Hamas should be terrified for their own lives. And I believe that these targeted killings should be extended to whomever permits these reckless and indiscriminate attacks against Israeli civilians and Israeli citizens. And doing so does not lead to a long and protracted war inside the Gaza Strip. But were we to go into a long and protracted war inside the Gaza Strip, which I think is highly unlikely, but were it to happen, I would not want to make a comparison between the prowess of the Israel Defense Forces and the ineptitude of the Saudis when it came to tackling the Houthis. I think that parallel is a bit of a dangerous parallel. I wouldn't want to grade us according to such a standard. But let's move on. I just have a couple of extra questions that I want to ask. And David, this comes back to you. And again, we couldn't have somebody better than you to answer this question because of your background, not only in the Israel Defense Forces, but also beyond that, in the Mossad and the Shin Bet and elsewhere. We saw a very, very public statement by Prime Minister Netanyahu, who praised the killing of these three leaders of Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And somewhat unusually, he was flanked by the Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, the Chief of the IDF General Staff, Herzi Halevi, the head of the Shin Bet, Ronen Bar. And just for context, just a few weeks ago, Prime Minister Netanyahu had fired the defense minister, Gallant. He then reinstated him. And there's also been heavy tension between the government and the Israel Defense Forces Chief of Staff surrounding the issue of judicial reform of late. Do you think that this was a genuine show of unity by the Prime Minister and the senior defense establishment leaders? Or was it merely a projection of unity? Or was it both, David? Was it sincere unity that needed to be projected to the Israeli public and to the international community? What are your thoughts on that?
Listen, first of all, I'm not in the, I would say, inside the rooms where these people are being assembled. But in my point of view, I saw this, press conference of Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, and the Chief of Staff, and the head of the Shabak, and the Ministry of Defense. And I think it was very much genuine, very much, I would say, very much impressive that the heads of the security of the State of Israel, led by the Prime Minister of Israel, are approaching the people of Israel, are speaking in front of the people about the Israeli interests and what were behind the Israeli operation in Gaza. And this seemed to me very much, I would say, impressive when I'm speaking as a citizen of Israel and looking for these leaders speaking in this press conference. And I think it was very much important that they, spoke in front of the Israeli public and explained the interests, the motives of the Israeli operation. I would like in this regard to say, and it's very much important, I totally agree with you, Benjamin. I think 2005, the decision taken by our Prime Minister, late Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, to withdraw unilaterally from Gaza is, I can call it the original sin. This was a very negative step, very negative move with enormous, I would say, implications, not good implications to the state of Israel, the 2005 move. And I think that to a large extent, what we saw later on, and I'm in this regard, I'm speaking first and foremost about the event of June 2007. Here I'm speaking about the very dramatic event which took place that period of time, the taking control of Hamas over the Gaza Strip and the kicking out, even the killing of the Palestinian Authority and Fatah members inside Gaza, and making, the split between Gaza, the Gaza Strip, and the West Bank and Judea and Samaria. This was, I think, the very important move in terms of what we have seen later on, the relations between Israel and the Palestinians. And this is, of course, we have to take into consideration for future moves taken by the State of Israel vis-a-vis the Palestinians. And second issue, very quick remark. I totally agree with Yochai. Listen carefully, Benjamin. I think that before you are taking a decision, Israel is taking a decision for launching war, for going to a war. In this case, I'm speaking about the Gaza Strip. You have to take into consideration all, I would say, the very important interests of Israel vis-a-vis the region as a whole. And in this regard, I'm speaking about the main priorities which have to be taken into consideration by Israel. And the main priority in this regard, the main threat, is from the Islamic Republic of Iran. And we have to mobilize all our forces, all our strength in order to cope with this situation. And in addition to that, I must tell you that today Hamas and the other forces in the area, radical forces, led by Iran, would like to see what we call the united fronts vis-a-vis the State of Israel, not only in the territories, not only in Gaza and the West Bank, but at the same time, Lebanon, Syria, and led, of course, by Iran. And this is something which is, I think, number one challenge for Israel right now in the area.
So, David, we only have time for a couple more questions, but I really appreciate that you agree that the original sin, as you termed it, was the unilateral withdrawal in 2005. I could not agree with you more, or you agreeing with me on that point.
Yes.
And I appreciate that. But but here I diverge from your opinion. The state of Israel is not in a reality where it, unfortunately, tragically, unjustly, gets to pick and choose when and where a fight is thrust upon it and upon its people. And I've said this many, many times. We have to, and I believe we do in most cases, just to be clear, I'm not undermining what the security forces have done. What we just did by eliminating these three individuals was absolutely masterful. And Yochai, I'm going to ask you a little bit about that in a moment. But as the Americans say, one has to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. So we have to be able to deal with Iran and deter Iran. But we cannot do that to the exclusion of threats that are upon us right now. Iran is not going anywhere. Their proxies are not going anywhere. And therefore, I am firmly of the view that we have to defang those who we can defang now while they are relatively weak and while their capabilities are confined to conventional capabilities as opposed to nuclear-tipped capabilities. If Iran gains nuclear capabilities and starts to inject tactical nuclear weapons into the battlefield by way of its proxies. And therefore, I'm sorry, I feel very, very strongly that we have to tackle Palestinian Islamic Jihad, not only and Hamas, not only in the Gaza Strip, but as we saw from just a couple of weeks ago, also their presence now on our northern flank. Because otherwise we will rue the day that we failed to do that as we face down a conflagration that emanates from multiple fronts towards our people and towards our citizens. We are just creating, unfortunately, through our restraint, I believe, a rod for our own backs. And I think that the whole policy needs to be reviewed and overhauled. And it needs to be informed by the type of responsible thinking that you are articulating, David, and that Yochai, you are articulating as well. I'm not for going in guns blazing anywhere and everywhere. I know the limitations of that. I've participated in wars for the state of Israel, and I understand the pitfalls of that. But the idea that we have to somehow mute ourselves because Iran is looming in the shadows, I think that that is backward thinking, and I just don't agree with it anymore. I think that it's brought about a terrible, terrible situation for Israel. Yochai, I want to ask you a quick question about coordination, and please tell me if you feel that I'm dropping too much of a task upon you, but knowing you as I do, I don't think that I am doing. This was, as I mentioned in my question to David, this was obviously a coordinated effort between the Prime Minister's office, the Minister of Defense, the Chief of the Staff of the Israel Defense Forces, the head of the Shabak, even the Mossad, and so forth. Can you just give us an idea of how coordinated and collaborative these different branches of our government and our security forces are in order to bring about the elimination of 3 terrorists within a 20-second, not 20-minute, 20-second window, according to reports?
Well, the coordination is done mainly by the IDF between the operational, the operator, the one that pulls the trigger, and the one that brings the intelligence. So the intelligence might be brought by Shabak or by the intelligence branches of the IDF. And so coordinating them is what into an operational plan is the expertise of the Israeli Air Force. Now, these guys are amazing, I have to say. What they have gained when they deal with Syria, attacking from everywhere in under enemy fire, has gained operational knowledge and knowing how to use different kinds of weapons and time them, as you say, to perfection. So everything hits the target within a window of 20 seconds is the operational capabilities that the Israeli Air Force and Shabak, because I don't know which one pulled the trigger, the specific trigger on these two, but this is how coordination on operational things happen. So when that plan is brought to the minister and then to the prime minister, it is already baked in, all these things. They just have to make sure that everyone knows what they're doing, why they're doing it, what's the time frame that things going to happen, and what is what is expected of them after these things happen, because it's a great opening move, but as you know, a chess game is not over when you did the opening move. It's about planning what to do next and how to do next, and the boundaries of what to do and how to do it. So this is what the Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense would talk to the IDF and the Shabak about, and how to protect our citizens and how to stop the trains and whatever. And then, but the operational things, that's entirely in the IDF and the Shabak.
Thank you. And my last question goes to you, David Hacham. Just in terms of the current operation that we have, not the longer strategic picture, where do we go from here? There's already talk about a ceasefire. There's already talk about an Egyptian brokered ceasefire, but there's still rockets that are being fired towards Israel. Where do you see this going? What's our expectation for the duration of this?
It's not hard to answer to this question, Benjamin, because we are with a lot of experience since the last 20 years of military operations being perpetrated by Israel in the Gaza Strip. And later on, we know what were the results of the military operation. I think, and this is my assessment now, we are now in the midst of attempts taken by Egypt, by Qatar, by the United Nations. These are the traditional mediators for, confrontations between Israel and Hamas and Al-Jihad al-Islami. So they are doing their utmost in order to reach, in a couple of hours, a ceasefire between Israel and the Gaza Strip, Israel and Hamas and Al-Jihad al-Islami al-Falastini inside Gaza. I think that to a large extent, when I'm, of course, based my assessment on my experience vis-a-vis the Gaza Strip, vis-a-vis Hamas and Al-Jihad al-Islami, I think that to a large extent, I don't see a desire from Hamas or Al-Jihad al-Islami now. Basically, I'm speaking about Hamas to continue, the military escalation with Israel. I think that to a large extent, Hamas would like to see the ceasefire going on. And this is why I think at the end of the day, the attempts by the Egyptians, by Qatar, by the United Nations will be fruitful, and we will reach at the end of the day a renewed ceasefire between us and the Gaza Strip. At the same time, I must warn, first of all, I must warn the Israelis, not to take, as something which is total final, any decision, any agreement reaching ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, because as we have seen in previous operations, after we reach some kind of principle, understanding with Hamas via the Egyptians, Hamas still, or Al-Jihad al-Islami still launched open fire against the state of Israel. So in any case, we must be very much careful. And as I've told you before, the bottom line, I think, that within a very short period of time, we are going to see a new ceasefire between us and Hamas.
Yeah, and David, I remember very, very well when I was in southern Lebanon during the Second Lebanon War in 2006, and I was a heavy gunner, and I was walking alongside the Samgad. I don't know how you translate Samgad. Yochai, help me out. How would you translate Samgad? The Deputy Battalion Commander?
Deputy Battalion Commander.
Deputy Battalion
Deputy Battalion Commander, yes.
Right. So I learned all these terms only in Ivrit. And so that's what I know them as. So I was walking there alongside the Samgad in southern Lebanon, and word of the ceasefire came over the radio, and we were informed about that ceasefire. And I turned to the Samgad and said to him, "That's it, it's over." And he said to me, "No, Benjamin, now it begins." And unfortunately, we have to continue vigilance. We have to continue the fight for as long as is necessary. And I wanted to close today with just one thing, which is that I'm obviously making this call from here in the United States of America, though I will be back home in Israel next week. And it's always incredibly frustrating, not just for me, but also for my colleague, for Rosita as well, to be in the United States when our country is in battle. And so I wanted to just read, if I may, a very short prayer, because I think when one is unable to act and one is able to impact, it certainly only helps to pray. And I say that not in a peak of religious zealotry, but merely as a simple human being and as a simple Jew. And so I read aloud the following: Avinu sheba shamayim, tzor Yisrael b'go'alo, barech et medinat Yisrael, reshit tzmichat geulatenu, hagen aleha, be'evrat kastecha, ufros aleha sukat shlomecha, ושלח אורך ועמיתך לראשיה, שריה ויועציה, ותקנם בעצה טובה מלפניך, חזק את ידי מגיני ארץ קדשנו, והנחילם אלוהינו ישועה, ועטרת ניצחון תתערם, ונתת שלום בארץ ושמחת עולם ליושביה, ונאמר אמן. And for those of us who do not speak Ivrit, the prayer that I've recited is the prayer for the states of Israel, and it says, Our Father in heaven, rock and redeemer of the people of Israel, bless the state of Israel with its promise of redemption, shield it with your love, spread over it the shelter of your peace, guide its leaders and advisors with your light and your truth, help them with your good counsel, strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land, deliver them, crown their efforts with triumph, bless the land with peace and its inhabitants with lasting joy. V'nomar amen, and let us say amen. These are not lofty goals for which we pray. These are the prayers that are the inherent right of every mother, father, son, and daughter of Israel, and dare I say of the world, and may we come to knowing a time of Shalom al Yisrael. I thank my colleagues at the MirYam Institute. Thank you very much, Yochai. Thank you, David. As I said during the course of our conversation, never do I leave a discussion with either of you without being enriched and educated, and I appreciate the vital context that you brought to our conversation today, as ever you do. And I look forward to the next time we convene, hopefully on a happier note. And may the guns fall silent very soon indeed. And thank you to our listeners. All the very best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double high or more. Simply visit the JBS website at jbstv.org and click on the donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check to JBS, Post Office Box 360, Stamford, Connecticut 06904. Or you can call the JBS Pledge Line at 833-MY-JBS-TV. That's 833-695-2788. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. We thank you for your kind support.